All right. I believe we're live and just want to thank everyone for joining us today. Good afternoon, and thanks for sharing your lunch hour with us. My name is Scott Schultz, the president of Schultz & Williams. We're a consulting firm located here in Philadelphia. And we have the privilege of working with nonprofit organizations around the country, and we've done so for over 33 years. So we've seen good times and bad times around the nation, and recessions and wars and natural disasters and market crashes and recoveries. We've experienced the amazing work that nonprofits can do as well in education and healthcare and conservation and arts and culture, community service. So being around for this long and having worked for literally 1,000 organizations over the years, we've seen an incredible balance of challenge and opportunity and how people have approached that and flourished. So you'd think we'd seen it all, but from history, we can kind of predict what's going to happen in the future. So I just want to admit that that's wrong, that this is not business as usual. This is something that we've never lived through before in its entirety. Over the last few months, we've all been dealing with really a cataclysmic series of events that has rattled the nonprofit world and the community that we live in and the world at large. You know, and it really, for us, started with the market correction in February that had people on edge to begin with. And then, of course, it was followed swiftly by the pandemic and its terrible ramifications to finally a national awakening on the need to end once and for all racial oppression and injustice that has weakened our nation for centuries. This crisis with all of those issues is truly unprecedented. So this is the time when leadership matters. And as we've been told over and over the years, leadership is really measured by how it handles crisis. So today, we have asked a few of our community's most distinguished and hardworking CEOs to help us understand how they have been coping with this crisis and how they are preparing their organizations for a sustainable future and for recovery. So we have an excellent panel here, and I'm going to introduce them. We have Marianne Fray from CEO of Maternity Care Coalition, Spector, the president and CEO of JEVS, Human Services, Dewan, the president and CEO of the Philadelphia Zoo, and Loree Jones, the CEO of Philabundance. And as I was kidding before we started this discussion today, we really have some incredible difference in perspectives here. We have Loree, who assumed her new position at Philabundance during the pandemic. So that's a whole unique set of circumstances. We have Vic, who had to close his institution and work behind the scenes to keep it going and literally, in his case, alive. Marianne, who I think I heard everyone's been working from home, hasn't been in the office since this whole thing started. And Jay, who's been with his organization for many decades. I won't put the number on it, Jay, but who has looked at it from a different perspective. So we have a number of different great minds and experiences here to learn from today. We will go through each organization here very briefly, and then we'll come back with some questions for our panel. So first of all, to the four of you, thank you very much for your time. I know we hear over and over again, we're all in this together. I think that I hope we're all in this together as well. So I'm just going to go kind of, Marianne, to you first. To kind of tell us about what's been happening at Maternity Care Coalition and how you've been dealing with the crisis we find ourselves in.
Thanks, Scott, and good afternoon, everyone. Deep thanks to Scott and Susan and the team at Schultz & Williams. I'm very honored to be included in this panel, and I want to just congratulate my co-presenters, Jay and Loree and Vic, who all are similarly navigating these what might be called shark-infested waters, but we're doing it together. And I'm just grateful for this opportunity to share some lessons learned. And I look forward to learning from colleagues, from learning from those on the phone who are broadcasting from all over for this opportunity to lead during this crisis. So a little bit about MCC, Maternity Care Coalition. Unlike Jay and unlike Loree, I've been with Maternity Care Coalition for approximately a year. Prior to that time, coming to the organization with a deep background in marketing and sales in a variety of organizations. My heart has always been in service of others. I grew up in Philadelphia with missionary parents in a rescue mission in North Philadelphia. So I grew up seated in the heart of service and have found myself comfortably back there. And what a journey. I would say that the things that most about myself and the organization and this crisis is that people matter, leadership matters, but I think most importantly, people and culture matters. I think perfectly when you said Schultz and Williams has been through ups and downs, wars, this and that. I have found that through this crisis, what has made a difference continues to serve families throughout the Southeast Pennsylvania is that we can only do what we do, which is help newly parenting families with strong staff. So although we have been out of office since March 10th, approximately March 12th, we have continued and we pivoted to providing delivery of services to our families. We serve about 5,000 families annually through 22 different programs. That is no small feat. And most of our funding, approximately 8% of it comes from federal government. We have an early Head Start center in South Philadelphia and programs that are supported by federal and state grants. But we also, and one of the things that we wanted to do as we were centering the needs of our clients that are primarily families that are in communities that are underrepresented, don't have great access, is what are their voices, what are their needs, and center those things and then grow from there. But what I found, what has been most helpful is we can't help clients until our staff are supported. So we've prioritized supporting our staff and figuring out what's our place in the ecosystem. And you'll hear as we talk about and as we listen to other stories that we've had opportunities to partner with organizations, many of them on the phone right now, particularly Philabundance. And I'm looking forward to having Loree talk about her story. We've had some great collaborations that have allowed us to serve our families much more richly. So that's just a little bit. Just if you leave it at this, we've been resilient. And as I said in the preamble before everybody else came on, we're not looking for a normal, we're looking to embrace the next normal because there will be after that. So it's not just about sustenance, it's about being able to anticipate and be resilient for the next normal. So as the conversation goes on, we'll talk a little bit more about that, and D has embraced that next normal. We've been resilient and we're making it bring the voice of our clients. Thanks.
Okay. That's interesting though. You're really talking about being prepared for the next normal. And one of the things you've done that to prepare for that is to focus on your staff today and to take care of those people that are taking care of your clients. And it's good to hear. Jay, JEVS has been part of this community forever, and you at the head for a long time. Tell us about what's happened at JEVS, how this has impacted the organization, and what you've seen as being the priorities as their CEO.
Happy to, and glad to be on this panel and with my fellow CEOs. You know, the strain of this is certainly the heavy weight of it on our shoulders is a shared situation. Everybody who works for us feels the same weight on their shoulders. But I am a believer in leadership at all levels, and I think that's one of the things that helps us really be able to move the agency forward and our services to the community forward, because everybody takes responsibility for their work and what they do with incredible passion. And so I didn't lose sleep over at night thinking about what my staff were going to be able to do or not do. I trusted them that they do it every day. And this is just a different way of doing business. So in an organization as diverse as JEVS, we had some activity that was essential and therefore open 24/7, and other activities that we were basically in automatic remote mode. We did not shut down. The only one program that actually was affected by a shutdown was our contract with the Philadelphia City Prison, because they weren't letting anybody into the prison, so they put our contract on hold until they're letting people back in who are outside contractors. But other than that, we've maintained our workforce. Nobody's missed a paycheck. We made a commitment that regardless of what was happening with the funding, we were going to see to it that everybody on our staff continued to receive a paycheck, and as much as possible to work as productive as possible. We operate group homes for people with intellectual disabilities and behavioral health issues. And we also, that's about 150 people who are taken care of 24/7. And then we have a home care agency that is seeing approximately 800 clients who are also aging and disabled. And in both cases, we were faced with the fears and issues of illnesses coming from COVID, and our big fear that we walked around with all the time was, what was going to happen next? What's the next shoe to drop? Is somebody going to get sick? We have to quarantine people. So having the protocols in place and the policies set up to be able to manage that was really critical to us handling being open, and that worked as well as I think it could, and so that was one part of our operation. The other part of our operation was the fact that we were still delivering services remotely, and with most of our programs for more the low-income population that we serve, many of them on welfare, and we're able to continue our service, reaching out to them. The challenge there was technology, or the lack thereof. And so, for us, it's seeing to it that we can find ways to get computers in some cases, Wi-Fi service in other cases, to our clients, using cell phones and smartphones as a means of staying in touch with people. So we're able to keep connected to the clients that we serve. The level of productivity really depended on the ability to access technology better than others. But one of the beautiful things I think in the organization is the fact that what it really did was brought everybody together in a way that they weren't before. And we immediately went into having teams set up to deal with certain issues, having our leadership team meet daily, our operations team to meet daily. And then as things got a little bit more under control, it was more like 3 days a week. But we were communicating like we are here today, using this technology platform as Zoom, as a means of really being engaged. And when you think about what would it have been like had Zoom not existed, it would have been a lot more difficult. As much as I don't like talking every minute of the day on Zoom, one Zoom meeting after another, I think we've tended to over program ourselves. But the fact that we have the ability, even though we're apart, to be able to be together is a beautiful thing. So, now we're looking forward to reopening. When March 12th came along, we had to close our Orleans Technical College, which is a post-secondary trades school, basically overnight. And we did not lay off the staff, we just kept them. And their job was to stay in touch with their students, to make sure their students' lives were being, okay, to make sure if they had needs, how to resource them some special needs, whether it was food or housing. We just stayed connected. And on July 8th, we reopened the school with about 150 students. I worried about the reopening because of what colleges are going through right now. And so fortunately for us right now, everything is going well. The students returned and they're well.
That's great. So there was really some silver lining in all of this, and that you had operationally, at least, it kind of elevated your communication with each other as a staff, got everybody on the same page, and use the technology to do that. But there's things we take for granted, don't we? That when we communicate every day, that needed to be operationalized, and that's an interesting story. Vic, your situation and circumstances certainly very different. Tell us a little bit about what happened at our favorite institution here in the community when you had to actually, stop the daily operation and hunker down and do things very differently. Tell us about your situation.
And thank you, Scott. And I think you mentioned that Schultz & Williams has been around for 33 years. I fantasize to believe we may be your customer. We have a cherished relationship with Schultz & Williams. It's been on for many decades. Thank you for having me on, and great to be with our other co-panelists. Talking about the zoo, I thought maybe I would share some perspectives from two perspectives. One, what the zoo has been through since mid-March, and then the personal journey of myself as a leader. I am a huge admirer of Nelson Mandela, who said that leaders lead from the back when things are going well. They give the credit to others, but in times of crisis, you lead from the front. And I'm not a person who's comfortable leading from the front. That's not been my style. And it's forced a different kind of leadership than I've been used to. And oftentimes leading from the front, what we're learned over the years as children is sort of the general Patton model of sort of put up the flag and take the hill, whereas this is a moment of empathy. This is a moment of connecting. This is a moment of putting yourself in the shoes of others, which is, again, a very different, it's a servant leadership style that's very different. And so there's been tremendous learnings from that, and tremendous risk-taking of sort of exposing yourself to things that you feel vulnerable about, and how in today's world that allows you to connect with your staff and your other constituencies in a different way. But as it relates to the zoo itself, for years we've been building a financial model at the zoo, which is about getting the zoo's operating expenses to be covered 100% by earned income. It's a great strategy until there's no earned income. And that's exactly what happened here. The pandemic hit exactly at the moment where we have the highest period of revenue growth, which is the springtime into the summer, and the expenses just don't go away for the zoo. It's not like we can turn out the lights and send the animals home. We have a significant amount of operational ongoing fixed costs that had to be made. And so the net effect on the organization was nothing short of an existential crisis for America's first zoo. We've been here for 160 years. But at this particular moment, we're facing the single largest financial crisis that we have in our entire history. I would hazard to say that we probably had these fault lines in our operations and in our programs pre-pandemic. But what the pandemic did is it exposed it completely. There was no hiding from where your weaknesses were anymore. whether those weaknesses were in programs that are not delivering, or whether that is in your financial delivery model, or whether that is in your organizational structure, all of a sudden it became absolutely clear where those weaknesses were. And then to be able to deal with it at a time where there's no playbook, there's nothing to follow, there's no benchmarking to go to. You're making decisions that seem to change massively every 3 to 5 weeks. At a moment, it looks like something's happening, and then 3 to 5 weeks later, it's dramatically different. But I think that the learnings from all of that were encapsulated best by the fact that we've worked hard on good governance. And a good board is really what makes all the difference right now. I'm very, very grateful for the board that we have and the way that they have stepped up to provide these diverse ways of looking at this current situation and provide some guidance. Our board chair, when this all happened in mid-March, got us together and said, you know, how many of you have heard of the Stockdale paradox? None of us raised our hands, and it turns out that Admiral Stockdale was a POW in Vietnam, and he survived there for many years when many others did not. And what he talked about was this paradox when you're a prisoner of war or in times of high stress, that those individuals who were POWs that were purely about the short term, only I got to live through today and can't think about tomorrow, didn't survive. And those that were POWs and thought only about the future, well, if only we can survive till Christmas, we'll get rescued, also didn't survive. And what our board chair said is you have to live in this world where you have to make your short-term decisions when they are there, but always keeping in mind the longer term as well. And that's the paradox that we're living in, and that has guided us exceptionally well. So where are we now? We have reopened. It's a very different world. And we are sharing with our staff that you can't waste a good crisis. We can't come out of this the other side thinking we'll go back to where we were in March. We will be a different organization in March of next year if that's when things come to some degree of equilibrium, or later into the summer. And when that happens, we have to be ready for an external world that's going to be different, a different consumer mindset, a different donor mindset. And we have to be ready and resilient in being able to address that. So we're still very much in it, Scott, and again, delighted to be here today.
Wow, thank you, Vic. That's a wonderful way of looking at things, and I think we can all learn from that. And one of the things we will do some follow-up discussion here today is about the role of the board, because as CEOs, one of the things that you have is the need to manage both up and down, and I think that doesn't. It demonstrates itself more clearly right now than it does during any other kind of time. Loree, you have a unique sort of situation in that, you know, I've described the organizations that we work with in terms of some have been thriving because of the circumstances, and some have been struggling, and some are fragile because of this. In a way, you've been thriving in that people knew right away that food was a big issue, and that people were lined up to help you. Now, that's not going to last forever because things never do. But the idea that you were kind of blessed with the support of a community that came to you because they knew who you were, what you did. But you also came to the organization during the pandemic. So where you weren't able to prepare, you had to react to the circumstances at the time you joined the Philabundance, which is such a great organization. Tell us a little bit about your perspective as the CEO there, especially given the fact that you joined during this nightmare.
Yeah, well, good afternoon. Thank you so much, Scott, for the work that you do and that your firm does to support so many nonprofits in this area. And also for this invitation to be with distinguished panelists, some of whom are friends of mine and one of whom is going to become a friend of mine. Jay and I are just connecting for the first time today. As challenging as these times are, I'm actually going to talk with a fair amount of optimism right now. So one of the kind of mantras, one of my favorite quotes is by Marianne Edelman, "Service is a rent we pay for a living." And I feel just personally and professionally incredibly fortunate and blessed to be able to be here at this moment in time. Like everybody probably listening, everybody on this call, I was, as I learned about COVID, as the world changed in March, I was personally frightened, worried, scared, concerned about my own well-being and that of my family, concerned about the people in the region that I love, you know, being a Philadelphian and raised in South Jersey as well. And also, even though I was doing what I thought was really great, important work for a great university in the area, leading their COVID response, also feeling like I wanted to be off the sidelines and wanted to be on the front lines more to respond. And so I had the opportunity to start, as you said, on June 2nd at Philabundance, and to join this organization, a hunger relief agency in this area that has for 35 years has delivered on its mission of ensuring that people have access to fresh, healthy food now across the 9-county region. And also, in addition to doing that work of ensuring people have food now, has also been working for at least 20 years to really address the root causes of poverty through workforce development, through social entrepreneurship, and place-based strategies. And so when the world was changing in the way that it has, when we started to see what was revealed to us were the cracks in the system, the ways that the people who were in fact most vulnerable were being impacted that much more. When the unemployment rates were going up, when food insecurity was going up, where we thought it was bad before, where here in this region and across the country, you started seeing 60% more people lining up for food. Bad as that is, I got the opportunity to join a team that responded as heroes. So I get to brag about it because it wasn't me, but let me tell you what they did, right? So world's changing, every few hours we're getting new direction about how to serve people. Central agency, they're open. From March to August, this team distributed 30 million pounds of food. Okay, that sounds like a lot, right? But understand that our talking point on our website is that each year we tend to distribute 28 million pounds. So for this 6-month period, we distributed 30 million pounds of food, and did that when, as you all know, if you went to the grocery stores, it's harder to get food. Food supply is all messed up, right? Everything's more expensive. Also, in terms of dollars, we had budgeted for this fiscal year to spend about $120,000 a month on food. We're spending over $500,000 a month on food, right? And so this team had to adjust in this period of time to get more food to folks, increase need. We're able to do that because we have incredible partners. So 350 agencies we work with across the region, but also and you mentioned this earlier, Scott, the generosity of everyday individuals, of donors, of philanthropists. Really, people have come through. And I think that as we've all come to realize that so many more of our neighbors have this need of this and are not able to provide just basic food for their families, people have stepped up in incredible ways. And they've signed over stimulus checks, right? So they've donated. And so that, again, like, how do you not feel really fortunate to be able to meet this need at this incredibly difficult time and to meet it in the way that we're able to? So I have a really strong team that did adjust. And I know we'll have a chance to talk a little bit more about what that's like. But I do also want to note that something I heard one of the co-panelists say, so we realize now that there were systems that were broken kind of across the country, in the city, in the region, but we also are realizing where there might have been challenges in our own organizations. So we do have the opportunity, as we prepare for this next normal, to make those adjustments. So I get the benefit too, coming in June 2nd, you know, to use a sports analogy, even though I'm not a sports person, with fresh legs, right? Came in, right? Energized, psyched to be able to lead this incredible team that's already doing great work, and then able to help us think about how do we get through this for the long haul. This is not ending tomorrow, but then how do we make sure that we come out of this stronger, more efficient, stronger partnerships and the like. So that's really a lot of the work that we've been doing.
I think that to your point, Loree, and there's a common theme here, is that you've all had to take care of your staff, right? Because they get fatigued. They've had been carrying, as you said, Jay, the weight. They've been sharing the weight of leadership and responsibility along this. And then I'd like to go back to what Vic brought up about short-term, long-term. How do you think in the dealing with short-term as you are, how do you think the long-term looks in terms of what your staff is going to expect as their new normal as a group? Jay, you mentioned the technology. I think, Vic, you mentioned the board stepping up and taking a leadership role. The staff doesn't always get to see that. And so I'm kind of just curious about the work environment and the way that your culture of handling your staff. I know from my own perspective here, you know, we do a Zoom call every couple of weeks and we've got 50 or 60 people on it, and they all want to know about when are we coming back to the office, or are we coming back to the office? And frankly, the hard part is I can't answer that question right now. I can't give them that information because I'm not comfortable yet making the call in terms of a date. So I'm kind of curious about, let's just look at the staff circumstances today. Vic, back to you for a second. What do you see? Because some of your staff had to leave, right? I mean, and others had to stay and probably carry an even heavier burden. What do you think of this, the staff kind of needs and opportunities moving forward?
Yeah, Scott, I think that's an incredibly important issue, and I think it needs to be grounded in what is the culture of your organization in order to be able to put context in terms of what your actions might be. We're a relationship-based organization, and being able to be in physical proximity with one another and being able to kind of josh and joke and talk is very much what defines who we are. And what is happening at Philadelphia Zoo is because we have essential staff that have to be physically on site to take care of the animals and the premises, and then we have about a half of our staff that are working remotely. It puts an even more important emphasis on good communication and opportunities to bring people together so that they feel like they are part of one organization and not two. And so steps are a lot of the ones that you would assume, you know, regular calls, regular reaching out, and being able to talk, but then also finding those things, Scott, that are the common experiences for everybody, as opposed to those that separate us or define us. I had the unfortunate experience about 5 weeks ago of thinking that I had contracted the coronavirus, the COVID virus, and fortunately, it turned out I had not, but I had presenting all the symptoms and doing all of that. I shared a little bit earlier how difficult it is sometimes to lead from the front from a point of vulnerability, but I chose to share that entire experience, not feeling well, the guilt, the anxiety, all of that with everybody. And what it did is it created a different way for people to feel connected with one another, because everybody is feeling that. Everybody is feeling that they're not in control of school and what's happening. And to be able to share the uncertainties and be real about that, I think has been what has brought us closer together. So too have the events post May 29th and the discussion within our organization around systemic racism and being able to talk not just about that aspirationally, but taking action. What can we do? And not talk about it programmatically or like, what can we do here, or can we start that program? But thinking about it systemically has allowed us to bring everybody together and make them all feel like one, as opposed to feeling like separated organizations.
Excellent. Marianne, your staff has to deal with clients, direct contact with the clients, you know, person to person. And Jay, many of your staff have that same responsibility. Marianne, tell us about, what do you do to make sure that your staff feels equipped and capable and they have the tools they need, but also the sort of, again, the word culture, the culture of being basically an essential worker in your field, right? So we've been two worlds, Vic. You know, we've been essential and non-essential. At this point, we're all essential. Everyone's essential. Everyone's on a new front line. The front lines move, but we're all on it. So Marianne, tell us about your staff work and what you're doing.
You know, I want to echo what Vic was talking about in terms of leading from the front versus leading from the back, and understanding the role that the leader has in setting the tone. Because truthfully, I think as leaders, we don't recognize that what we say and do, it really is adopted, and it impacts the rest of our team. And so that whole idea of what our staff doing, it starts with us. And I've often shared that you look in the mirror and that's where the change has to start. So when our staff are going out and we're asking them to either, they pivoted and using technology immediately, we are ensuring that we communicate with them constantly. There is, you know, the way each of our co-presenters talked about have a certain amount of uncertainty. I share Loree's optimism. I recognize there are points at which, you know, I don't have the answer, and I say that, but we committed from the very beginning, personally as a leader, to communicate how it was affecting me, asking them to talk about how it affected them, and providing platforms for processing that. So for example, after George Floyd's murder, we immediately, you know, I didn't have a playbook. I didn't know what to do. I was feeling a lot of anger and frustration and fear and standing. And I just said, I'm getting on the phone and we're going to have a town hall. We're going to talk about it. And that one decision that I didn't really know if that was the right thing to do, but I just felt like it was the thing to do to address it. That platform served as something that we ended up doing more regularly, and we did with the board. We had an unstructured call to process what we were feeling with our board partners, with the staff, and it has been an incredible way in which we started to catalyze a conversation that really is making a difference. So when you ask me, Scott, you know, how are we taking care of staff? We're confronting, starting with ourselves, and then saying, okay, how do you feel about this? And then what together can we do to make a difference? And Jay, I think when you talked earlier about leaders at every level, we hire really great people, at least I hope we do. Let them do what they need to do, and let's listen and center the client's voice, and then we step back and give them opportunity to share and contribute to making a difference. So I think that's some of the things that we've done at NCC.
Hey, do you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, I just had a couple of things on that. One is certainly the fact that being more client-focused, client-centered is something that we all have been trying to move in that direction. I think this certainly is an opportunity now that comes out of the situation we're in today to really regroup around that, because our clients have incredible challenges and barriers that keep them from re-engaging in the world of work. Some of it because of their family situations, whether they're at home also trying to manage their children who are going to school remotely, but also, you know, what the labor force looks like and what kinds of opportunities are really there to help people move out of poverty. I mean, that's really why we're doing the work that we do. We don't want to just find somebody a job. We want to find somebody a career that will create a self-sustaining life, and so that Philadelphia is not any longer listed as the poverty capital of the country. And we really have a lot of work to do to make that happen. One of the things, one of the statistics I recently looked at from our agency is in the last several months of job placements that we've made, what I discovered was that some of the bigger employers who in quantity were hiring people weren't our tried and true employers, but were staffing agencies. And it dawned on us that, wait, we're talking about somebody is at least earning a paycheck, but they're a contract employee. They're a gig worker. There's no future there. And so it may relieve some of the financial burden in the short term, but what are we going to do to make sure that they get credentials, make sure that they get their high school diploma, because more people are going to come and drop out of school in this environment than ever. And how do we serve that group? So we have to really be prepared to start thinking differently about how we work and what our outcomes are. You know, it's been a really incredible journey through this situation, and I think we're all learning some new things and, that we'll take into the future. You know, the like Marianne, you know, we also, as it relates to Black Lives Matter, you know, our 70% of the population we serve are minorities. 70% of our workforce is minorities. And we have to make sure that we as an organization recognize the needs and wants and desires of the people who we serve, and we should reflect that in who we are as an organization. And so we also had town hall meetings and started a process to make sure that it wasn't a once and done situation, but that we're addressing this every day. And so I think that also helped at least bring some of the staff together. But we have to communicate more and more. And that's still a challenge for us. We have, you know, breaking free from the typical way we used to communicate to a different way of communicating. And it's really a challenge in an organization that has over 30 some locations, and where a third of our workforce also work in group homes. They're isolated. You know, they don't have the advantage that other people had. On one level, they don't have the advantage because they, you know, they work in a house with some disabled clients, and that's their normal workspace, and that hasn't changed. Their fears of getting sick is another issue that we have to deal with. The emotional side of supporting them. But for them, works the same in that regard. But the other employees that we have, it's what's next for them. When are they returning to work? Right? And a lot of that is not controlled by us, it's controlled by our funders. And what risk they're willing to take. And we know one thing's for sure, we're going to be thinking differently about how people return to work. They're not going to return to work full time. They will be working from home part time. And we're not going to make clients come in to a facility with hundreds of other people. Those days are gone. So how do you serve those individuals in a way that is still going to get the kind of results that they need so that they can engage in the workforce?
You know, that's very interesting. You know, Loree, I've had the privilege of working with a Meals on Wheels program in California for 33 years, ever since we started the company. And we always talk about theirs that we're feeding, we're not just feeding people, but we're delivering food and love. That part of the, you know, part of the product there, the service we're providing is greeting people, seeing people. And now that's changed. And there's, again, it's a handshake. I'm a hugger. So, you know, I need to hug people. Can't do that. And in your case, Loree, your program also builds opportunities for people to volunteer, because it's not just about, you know, relieving hunger. That's the product, but the idea that people are allowed to participate in that. Where does that fit into your business model now, with people not being able to, you know, connect to Philabundance in that way?
Yeah, it's a great point. I'm here in Galloway, or Galloway Warehouse, which is down near the stadiums in South Philadelphia. And it is a place where probably many people even watching have come in to volunteer. So early on, we limited volunteers, no surprise, as we were all learning about this virus and how it could be spread and how to keep people safe. Our volunteer center is in fact open. So we do have volunteers in. There's probably about half a dozen of them in there right now. And so what we do is we've obviously made the shifts a little bit smaller to allow for social distancing. For all of our locations, and we actually have 3 locations, everybody who comes through has to get their temperature checked every day. We also ask people to you know, verify that they don't have COVID, they haven't been exposed to it, et cetera. So we've tried to, we do, you know, maintain social distancing. We have masks and gloves available for folks. We do the routine cleaning, the deep cleanings on the weekends, spot surface cleaning throughout the day, all day. So we're doing everything we can to ensure that the environment is safe for our volunteers and for our staff. but we have had volunteers in, not as many as we've had before. The other change I will note is that early on, again, as we were all learning about COVID, we stopped accepting donated food, which has historically been a great way. People dropped off food, had food drives for us. Just 2 weeks ago, just before the start of Hunger Action Month, which is this month, we've been able to open that back up again. So people can drop off food at our Berks location. But also what we've done, I think really your team was helpful in this, is for those folks that couldn't come out or didn't want to come out, we also had the ability for people to contribute virtually. And so the virtual food drive is something that we saw great success in, because so many people did want to help, and so we just provide another vehicle for them to do so.
Even given the fear of contracting COVID, people still expressing their love for Philabundance by offering their volunteer services during this time.
Listen, Friday afternoon, there was a full volunteer shift. So a Friday afternoon on a beautiful summer day leading into a holiday weekend. Absolutely. I encourage people to come and volunteer either with us or with one of the agencies. One of the things that has shifted is some of the food that we provide is for seniors, and pre-COVID, seniors would have to pick that food up. So now during COVID, and here's one of these opportunities for us to do things differently going forward, through our agency partners as well as through volunteers, those food boxes are now being donated to seniors. If I have my way, we'll continue to deliver them to seniors and not have them pick them up.
So all of you share one thing, that says we all need funding, right? I'm nervous about what's going to happen in terms of local and state public funding for some of the programs we all have when the dust settles, and local governments in particular, I think, are going to be hard pressed because they've spent a lot of money these days. How is dealing with this crisis changed your case for support in reaching out to your volunteers? I know that all of you have much more to your programs than you generally communicate to your donors or to the community at large. Vic, one of the things that I know you've done since you came to the Philadelphia Zoo is really elevated the conservation program. And, people think of the zoo as a wonderful place to go and be with their families, and they don't, all of them at least, know how strong your conservation efforts are. And that's where a lot of your contributed dollars go. How does this change the narrative for you all in expressing or messaging who you are, what you are? I always talk about people don't give because you're needy. People give because you're successful in meeting needs. How does this change your narrative? And I'd like to ask each of you quickly to sort of comment on that before we wrap up. Vic, you first.
Yeah, I think this is a topic that could take us for probably a couple of hours, because there are several dimensions to this conversation. I think those of us that have funding that is derived from public sources are seeing a very different landscape and a set of issues. Those of us that are supported by larger foundations are absolutely seeing and feeling the issues around the urgency of emergency funding for certain sectors and being able to address that, also in light of issues around systemic racism and bringing those issues together. Having said all of that, I think that there are some very important ways in which getting people reconnected with your core story, why you exist, what you do, and why you do it, is phenomenally important. And I think one of the silver linings out of the pandemic is that while we were closed, we really stepped up our virtual and online programming and put out a content every day. And with that came an opportunity for people to contribute. We have received almost 4 times the number of first-time donors this year than we have in any other year in our history. And so it's a very important moment to take advantage of those and connect. Having said all of that, the landscape and the outlook from a philanthropic perspective, whether that be for operating or whether that be for capital, is incredibly, incredibly difficult at the moment. And I think it's even more important that you are number 1, number 2, or number 3 as someone's priority. Because if you're not in the top 3, it's unlikely that that's going to happen. And so being able to start up a brand new thing or be patient with these first-time donors, I don't think that's going to happen for that perspective. So short term, okay, we'll make it through even though we have a gigantic hole this year to fill. The question is longer term. How does it change the landscape of the mix, and how do we adjust?
Always said we're not looking for gifts, we're looking for donors. We want to make sure that we can transition people from that first gift to the second gift. Let's hope that we're very good at that. Marianne, would you give us a minute there on what you see?
I think the work that we've recently embarked upon, we're about closing out with Theory of Change. We've partnered with an organization, right? That's going to create a meaning from translating that donor, right? What you just described. And so Vic had talked about like the short and the medium or the longer term and that tension. What I think is critical is having a clear path to how you're going to get to sustainability and tying in our strategic plan. And so anyway, the Theory of Change has been helpful. The work we've done with Schultz and Williams in clarifying how we make decisions has also been incredibly helpful. And so we've had some wonderful partners that have helped crystallize for us how we're going to translate our value to a broader audience. So I think the key is having the right people, making sure you're thinking and you're balancing, as Vic said, the short and the longer term, but that pathway centering the client is really what I think is key to sustainability and making sure that we continue to have gifts going forward.
Jay, how do you think that the messaging is going to be applied to your fundraising efforts moving forward?
Well, first of all, our fundraising is relatively, as you know, Scott, smaller part of our overall budget. We have a really strong, solid base. It's expanding beyond our tried and true donors and being able to reach out to a larger audience, which is what we're faced with. And messaging in an organization that is so diverse as ours, it's hard to focus on what's the message because you just can't spit out 30 different programs that to people, as you know. But one of the things we're dealing with right now is this more of a laser focus on the workforce side of the organization, filling in a little bit on what I said earlier about how people are in really more temporary jobs. So our emergency campaign that we're getting ready to really start is going to be focused on how do we deal with the digital divide, because that's the number one thing that's holding all of our clients back. And then how do we provide more wraparound services to individuals, because our clients have significant barriers to employment, and now made worse in some cases because of the world we're living in. And so how do we deal with that? How do we deal with getting more certifications and higher and advanced degrees so that people can compete for higher level, higher paying jobs? That's really where we want to start focusing and messaging. That's a long-term process. It's not going to happen overnight. But I think what we have to do really is to start being clear with that message of, what we need to do to support people and telling those stories about how we do support people. The parts that most people don't think about, they just think, oh, you see a client, you get them a job, that's the end of it. That's just the beginning. So we really have to be clear on that message.
Again, it goes back to the core of your program, and not right, and it goes back to your mission and your values and your vision, and a lot of that, of course, is usually articulated in a strategic plan. But one of the things that I know we're talking to a lot of people about right now is having more than one scenario for their strategic plan. What if, and doing kind of business planning with that. What will it look like if? Loree, could you kind of give me your perspective on, the need to be creative and flexible in planning for the long term that Vic was talking about?
No, absolutely. And as you talk about strategic planning, this is the year that Philabundance would have done strategic planning. The last time ended in 2019. But two things happened. One, there was a transition in leadership, and then COVID happened. And so our plan is to start strategic planning in January. But let me tell you a little bit about what predates that. We also, with our incredible board, have the opportunity to do the foundational work of that planning later this month with a board retreat. And we've got a great nationally known consulting firm that's been wonderful about working with us as we start to build out what that looks like. In addition to that strategic planning work, starting with the board this month and then kicking it off in the new year, we will think about various scenarios. But we also are trying to address the core of how we do our work through our people. And so folks talked about culture. And one of the things we're doing, and we've already done, is some work around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so we plan to do some more of that work at the end of this calendar year. That also is kind of the foundational culture work to help us think about what we want to be in this next iteration of Philabundance. Yeah.
Well, I want to say one thing here that, I know that you all have confirmed for me, reaffirmed for me, which is how lucky we are to work in the nonprofit sector. I got to tell you, I've spent my life working with nonprofit organizations, and every once in a while I'll meet somebody who's jaded and doesn't see or understand the value of the sector. You've all described it for me, and I think the work you all do is amazing. And for all of you who are out there today, all of you understand the value and the importance and the essential role that you all play. Again, at different times, we're all going to have to step up and be on the front line. And I think that, and Vic said it, I've always said to people, don't give just because you're important or worthwhile. They give because you're a priority. You have to create that sense of being a priority to your donors. And I think that that's important moving forward. The other thing I just want to take away from today is I want to thank Loree for saying that this is about opportunity. It's pretty easy to feel the heat here and to understand that, boy, we ever going to dig out of this? Well, yes, we will. Yes, we will, but Marianne, it'll be the new normal, right? We don't exactly know what that looks like, but we can conceive of some future for all of us. But I think to be able to get there, we have to take Loree's attitude and feel optimistic, and that there's opportunity in this that we can all learn from. And then the final thing is how valuable and important, and I know I'm going to go back and thank all of my staff, because you've all been talking today as leaders, as CEO, the importance of your staff, communicating with them, having transparency, letting them in on the decisions and what it looks like moving forward. So this is a very, complicated world, but we're going to succeed, and we're going to come out of it better on the other end. And I think we picked 4 wonderful people here to share this with. We're going to be doing more of these in the future, so keep your eyes and ears out for them. But I want to thank all of you. You guys are doing a great job, and I can't thank you enough on behalf of my firm and all the people that are involved in the nonprofit community here in Philadelphia and around the country that we get to work with. So thank you. I guess our time is up. You can go back and eat your lunch or that you didn't get to eat today. But thank you all very much. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
you.
Touch everyone.
Stay
Good
safe.
seeing everybody.